Hi, it's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and today is Bodyful Day 8. We're working on taste, and the question, of course, is why you might want to put salt in your hot chocolate. Now, it is way too warm for hot chocolate, so we are going to do this exercise with the one thing that we have been working on in my house with today, which is rhubarb. All right, so rhubarb, or something naturally bitter or sour. This is my salt cell and the sugar bowl. All right, those are your props today. Something bitter or sour and sugar and salt. All right, let's start with our deep breaths in and release. Deep breath in. Sinuses, lungs, sacrum, and belly expand. Expand yourself. Deep breath in. And release. And think about any stress from today. Think about any pain you had from today. And take a deep breath in. And release. All right, so today we're talking about bitter foods again, bitter or sour foods again. And just so happened that I went and trashed my rhubarb patch. I got 2 rhubarb plants and I went and butchered them today because my husband wants them cleared out so that he can mow his lawn. Rhubarb is interesting. Rhubarb is a weed. And when you eat it, it is remarkably sour with a little bit of bitter and very fibrousy. So it has some positive qualities, it has some negative qualities. I'm definitely going to increase my fiber boost for today. It is good for you. Don't eat the leaves. The leaves are poisonous. The reason why I bring it up is that today I looked for a bunch of recipes to do with rhubarb. Rhubarb crisp, rhubarb strawberry jam just isn't something that we do in our house, but we do make ginger beer. And I thought, hey, we could make a rhubarb beer or rhubarb soda. We could make a rhubarb sorbet because I have an ice cream maker. And then I was looking for a different recipe, and I came across a Norwegian American recipe for pickled rhubarb. And so that brought to mind the fact that we have talked about accommodation, how looking through the lens of one thing allows us to see things differently. Let me bring this up backward a little bit. We talked about accommodation in the sensory system, adaptation in the sensory system, when we talked about white noise for sound. That sort of drones out but allows us to focus on other things and maybe relax the body. We talked about adaptation when we did the red shift on the devices, because that changes everything to red, but if you look long enough, you're able to figure out what most things are, even if the red is a little overbearing. We briefly touched on smell, the fact that you can walk into a house that has a lot of garlic cooking, and later on you adapt to it. The interesting thing about taste is that depending upon what flavor you put with something else, different elements of that item are brought out. So chocolate by itself is very bitter and not sour, but very bitter. And we normally add sugar to it because we want to sweeten it up. Now, with rhubarb, we can do exactly that. In fact, a lot of people swear by just going out and grabbing a stalk of rhubarb and dipping the end in sugar. And chewing on it. Because it gives it a slightly sweeter flavor. It tones down that sour. And kind of makes it like eating maybe a crunchy watermelon. But the Norwegian American recipe for pickled ginger reminded me that you can do the same thing with salt. You can I'm not going to put a whole bunch of salt in there. You can have the same thing with salt. Now, once you put sweet on there, it enhances a lot of the sweet flavors. But once you put salt in something that's bitter, it enhances its sweet flavors. So again, the rhubarb is less sour than it was before because I have this contrast between the sour and the salt. Again, the fiber. There are a lot of cultural groups who will put salt in their hot chocolate because it enhances the sweet component. Likewise, I have a fly attacking my ankle. Likewise, you can dip your rhubarb in a little bit of salt and eat it just as you would with the sugar. And for some people, that contrast between bitter or sour and salty is actually much sweeter than it is just doing bitter and sour and sugar. So, for future reference, you can dip your rhubarb or your chocolate in sugar. And that activates our sweet sensors, but I still have a lot of bitter in there. Whereas when I use the salt, again, I don't want to use much, but when I use the salt, I lose a lot of the bitter because the salt then enhances the perception of the sweet. So, adaptation allows us to take flavors that we wouldn't normally think. We think salty and sweet are opposite each other. But salt, the presence of salt, enhances the contrast of the sweet, it brings down the bitter in rhubarb, whereas the sugar, adding sugar to rhubarb, still keeps the bitter. So, when you have your next cup of hot chocolate, weeks from now, months from now, you may consider putting a little bit of salt in there, and that will enhance the sweetness and tone back a little bit of the saltiness, or a little bit of the bitter. And you could actually use more dark chocolate, and it would do the same thing. All right, I'm going to go finish my rhubarb, make sure that my boys aren't boiling down my house, and we're going to have a deep breath in and release. Have a great day. I'll catch you tomorrow.